Hey folks, it's Rick Wilson. Welcome back to the Enemies List. Today's episode, there's a simple, clear shot at who the enemy is this time. It's the easiest, the reigning champion, is the all-time top of the fecal mountain of the enemies list. The worst person to ever besmirch the Oval Office. The worst human being to ever hold a major public office in America. It's Donald John Trump, 45th and 47th President of the United States of America. And look, there are a million reasons to put Donald Trump at the top of the enemies list. There are a dozen new ones almost every day. Great and petty offenses to the country. But on Tuesday of this week, Donald Trump came out and he described very clearly that he knew who Virginia Guiffre was. He knew she was a towel girl, a spa assistant at Mar-a-Lago. He knew Jeffrey Epstein had, quote unquote, stolen her from him.
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, does that include Virginia Guiffre?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her.
You're wondering, I'm sure like many people, if a man who has such a widespread, diverse empire in real estate development and golf courses and resorts and condos and all that other stuff, how did Donald Trump know a 17-year-old girl who worked for him? How did Donald Trump know that a teenager who was one of those staffers in resorts who is essentially, not that they don't work hard, not that they're not good people, but they're essentially invisible? You're asking yourself, how does he know who this young, invisible staffer was? How does he know? Her testimony over time is much clearer than Trump's. And I think this is an important story. I think the Guiffre thing is important, and Donald Trump deserves the enemies list position here because it's so important. Donald Trump is not a stranger to this person, not a stranger to what Epstein was doing, not a stranger to who Epstein was, not a stranger to what Epstein was. His elliptical comment in 2004, "Oh, Jeff likes him on the younger side." When you match that up with the wonderful secret book quote that Donald Trump sent for his birthday book, for Epstein's birthday book, when you match that up with a lifetime of Donald Trump making skeezy, weird comments about young girls, like, "I'll be dating her in 10 years, to like a 7-year-old.
Thursday night. You're going up the escalator? I'm going to be dating her in 10 years. Can you believe it? Okay.
When you match it up with Donald Trump saying he wanted to have sex with his own daughter, when you match it up with Donald Trump on Howard Stern saying 12 is his youngest, his lower limit, when you match it up with Donald Trump nodding his head when they called him a sexual predator on Howard Stern, the Epstein stuff is a source of enormous chaos in the country right now. It's a source of enormous revelation to a lot of folks who supported Trump for a long time. It's a source of enormous enlightenment to people who really loved Donald Trump, and they really thought Jeffrey Epstein was a terrifying pedophile monster, which he was. And they can't figure out why Trump is hiding the truth, covering up the files. Remember, 1,000 FBI agents were dispatched to the Department of Justice to review hundreds of thousands of pages of Epstein-related documents and videos and photographs and other evidence, laptops, servers, all these things, all this information. We've repeated testimony from different girls who were abused by Epstein about the presence of video cameras and recording devices all over his homes. Donald Trump's covering that up. He's covering up who was there, who was abusing which girls. He's covering up the entire panoply of information about the victims. And I think we've all, and I include myself in this, we've all given short shrift so far to these victims. We've all given them, we've had a lack of attention to the horrible nature of what happened to these young girls who were raped. These girls were not mature women who understood what they were getting into. Epstein Maxwell, with that, as my friend Stuart says, that sparkling of royalty fairy dust from England seemed sophisticated and elegant, and they were lured in by that. And she gaslit them, and they had to service Epstein sexually. And most of those young girls didn't do that because they were conscious of the matter, because they made an uncoerced choice. They were sexually trafficked by Ghislaine Maxwell. They were sexually trafficked to Jeffrey Epstein and to Jeffrey Epstein's rich friends, and perhaps to Donald Trump. Now, look, I don't think of Donald Trump as a guy who would know a young girl who worked in the women's section of the Mar-a-Lago spa. He is not notoriously an employer who takes great care of his people, as you could see from any part of the historical record. And so how he knew that Jeffrey Epstein had stolen her from him, I think is one of the most critical questions here. It should enlighten you much more than you were enlightened before about who Trump is. It should tell you much more about what Trump thinks about human beings. He stole her from me. He stole her. He stole his property. He stole his chattel. He stole his slave. He stole a human being. But you don't steal human beings, Donald. That's kidnapping. It's trafficking. And if that had happened, if Donald Trump knew who Jeffrey Epstein was and why he was so angry about someone being stolen from him, and you know Donald Trump knew who and what Jeffrey Epstein was. Donald Trump never called law enforcement, never called the police, never called the FBI, never called anybody. To our knowledge, he never called Virginia Guiffre's parents or family and said, hey, by the way, this guy that I know has stolen your daughter, your 17-year-old daughter. These are wealthy and powerful men who are manipulating young girls. At 17, you are not sophisticated enough to understand that. She's from the wrong side of the tracks. She's not a girl from the game, not somebody that understands what these men will and can do to them. And Donald Trump, when he was angry that someone was stolen from him, it's not a phrase you use about humans, folks. When Donald Trump said yesterday, no, after that, I told him it's over. Don't do it again. And he did it again. Still for years after, was photographed with Epstein, was friendly with Epstein, said nice things about Epstein in the press. A lot of people in the last few days have said, the whole thing with the trade deals is a big story in the economy and this and that and Jerome Powell and every other distraction. America stands at a very interesting and dangerous moral moment. The test we're being given is not a pretty test. It's not a happy test. It's not a test that anyone wants to have to take. But I think it's a test that's important about who we are as a country, who we are as individuals, what we believe is worth defending. I am a Southern 61-year-old conservative-leaning guy. I'm not a MAGA, but I do believe that protecting people, protecting the vulnerable is a conservative value. I believe as a man, it's a manly value. I believe that as a human being, it's a human value. But when he said this yesterday about her being stolen, he didn't try to protect the girl. He didn't try to get her back. He didn't try to make her free of the influence of a man he knew to be a predator. He didn't protect her at all. And look, I am very hesitant as a general rule to give our MAGA friends a lot of credit. But there are some who are waking up now to understand that the value that Trump has sold them, he's the strong one who'll take care of the bad people, has always been a lie, has always been a scam, has always been a con, has always been a flim-flam, has always been his act, his bullshit. And I will tell you, if you were not, as a human being, horrified by that particular failure, he knew what Epstein was. He knew who Epstein was. He'd been with Epstein. They were running buddies. He knew what he was. It's a wonderful secret between them. Trump was angry with Epstein for taking his property, but he wasn't angry enough to try to protect the girl, to try to protect Virginia Guiffre. He wasn't angry enough to say to Epstein, you bring her back here right now, you son of a bitch. He wasn't angry about a victim, even though he knew she would be victimized, even though he knew she would suffer from the predations of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's not what he was mad about. This was like somebody borrowed a golf cart and didn't bring it back. He didn't care about the girl. He cared about his own ego that Maxwell and Epstein had stolen something that he considered his property. Folks, there's a lot of great reporting out here about who these people are. Tara Palmieri, outstanding work. Tina Brown, Vicky Ward, outstanding work. Julie Brown, outstanding work. A lot of people have covered this story. I think all of us now, especially going forward, these victims of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, they're terrified now. They're terrified Maxwell will walk free. She is a monster. We know this. We know this from grand jury testimony that's been released. We know this from court records that have been released. We understand the scope of her evil and her depravity. I don't think people yesterday, when they heard Trump say this about his knowledge of Virginia Guiffre, his knowledge of her at a granular level 20 years after the fact, 25 years after, is incredibly telling. It's incredibly disturbing. It's incredibly depressing. You know, we have failed in the last decade. These stories have been out there for a long time. Trump's relationship to Epstein has been known for a long time. Yes, some reporters have really pieced it together over time. But now I think we have a much more complete picture of who and what Trump is and who and what Trump believed about his property, about his chattel, how little he did to protect her. Virginia Guiffre is gone, committed suicide in April. And we need to put these victims front and center going forward. We need to put them in the faces of the people who abuse them. That starts with Ghislaine Maxwell. I strongly encourage everyone, let's get behind Ro Khanna's effort to ensure that there's a congressional sense so Donald Trump knows that he should not pardon Maxwell. I think the fix is already in. I think the deal is being finalized as we speak, that he's going to pardon Maxwell or promise her a pardon at the end of his term, which is horrifying, which is unbelievably horrifying. You know, when Trump pardoned Mike Flynn and Roger Stone and Paul Manafort and Rick Davis, all those other people that he pardoned, it was outrageous. It was shitty. It was covering his ass. But if he pardons Ghislaine Maxwell, if he lets that woman walk free, if he commutes her sentence and doesn't pardon her even, if she walks free, if she spends a day under the same free sun as the rest of us, it is pissing on the graves of the victims who've already passed. It's slapping in the face the victims who survived. And it's telling people like Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, and there are still people like them out there. Sadly, we live in a very fallen world, and there are still people like them out there. It's telling them, good luck. Maybe somebody who thinks you're their property might defend you, but if they're Donald Trump, they probably won't. And that, folks, is why Donald Trump is permanently on the top of the enemies list. All right. Part 2 of this episode of the Enemies List is coming up right now. Folks, this show is brought to you by Lincoln Square. At Lincoln Square, we're building a new community of smart, talented, pro-democracy writers, thinkers, communicators, broadcasters, podcasters who believe that you need and deserve the tools to fight back against authoritarianism every day, that you need the tools to fight back right now, that we can't wait. We can't hope for something better to come along. We need to take action today. That's what Lincoln Square is all about. That's why we were founded. That's why I write there. That's why my podcasts are there. Lincoln Square is an important and growing community on Substack, and we're very honored how quickly folks have adopted the Lincoln Square family into theirs. Folks, if I can encourage you today to subscribe to Lincoln Square, there's a free side of it. There's a lot of great content there. And there's a supporter side of it, which gets you early episodes of things like the strategy session and early access to some of our content. But what's most important about it is it's growing fast. I want you to be a part of it. I hope you'll join today. Emil Bove. This guy, by the way, when you see Emil Bove, all right, let's bring a picture of Emil Bove up right now. How old do you think that guy is? He looks like he's ridden the ass coattails of Satan for 1,000 years. He looks like he's a necromancer's assistant in the bowels of a castle somewhere. He looks like a guy who might have robbed a grave or two in his life. 44 years old. 44. He was confirmed this week by the U.S. Senate to the federal bench. A lifetime appointment. But here's the great part. Donald Trump is going to use his boy Emil Bove, a former personal attorney of his, who lost for him, but be that as it may. He's going to put Emil Bove on the Supreme Court. You watch. Now, the Senate was aware of and knew that Bove had both lied to the Senate repeatedly and was currently involved in several cover-ups at DOJ. They knew this, and yet all but two of them, mildest of props to Murkowski and Collins for once living up to what they said they were worried about. But the Senate took the nomination and ran it like shit through a goose. So this part of the enemies list is not just about Emil Bove, who is a terrible, unqualified, shitbird human being. He's a bad dude. And his one merit, single only thing that makes him worth putting on the court for Trump is absolute loyalty and obedience. He will not rule from the court. He will serve as Trump's voice on the court. There's already been an article in The Atlantic about the plan to elevate Bove to the Supreme Court. Again, Trump no longer trusts the Federalist Society, which, Leonard Leo, you got $1 billion out there, champ. You ought to do something with it. Call me crazy. But Trump wants to put people on the bench who are utter loyalists, who will never break, who will never vary, who will never question, who will always know what he wants. And Bove is one of those people. This guy should not be running a traffic court, much less be on the federal bench. This guy is so amazingly corrupt just from his 6 months in DOJ. In several cases, one in particular, Bove has been saying, oh no, we lost your documents. The DOJ we can't figure out where and all these things that were being delayed suddenly turned up right after he gets his nomination confirmed. Isn't that a Christmas miracle? But Bove is a harbinger of the future. Clarence Thomas may someday soon either shuffle off this mortal coil or spend more time with his billionaire patrons in retirement. I don't think he wants to leave, but I don't think he's too super healthy. Alito, it's getting up there. But Trump is hoping, desperately hoping, he wants one more person on the court, one more body on that court. And the idea that one president will have appointed 4 nominees to the Supreme Court, each more radical than the last, should make your ears prick up, should make your brain go, huh, is this really the best possible outcome for America? I will argue very passionately it is not. Bove is a particular dangerous, corrupt flavor of this. He's a mob lawyer feel. There's a mob lawyer vibe to this guy, and he's going to be on the court for life. He's not some renowned jurist. He's not a scholar. He's not a deep thinker about the law. He's not a conservative. He's just Trump's guy. He's just Trump's guy. And the Senate, John Thune, I don't want to hear a fucking word from John Thune about, oh, we're going to put a moderate path. We're going to make sure that, bitch, please. There's nothing the Senate will not do for Trump now. They've become fully MAGA-fied. Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski may dip on a vote like this, but they're still going to vote with Trump 95% of the time. A guy like Bove would be very helpful for Trump on the court. Lower court first, and then the quick elevation to Supreme Court. And you know what the Senate will say then? The president deserves his nominees, no matter who they are. It doesn't matter if they're qualified or not, because we've named a cabinet full of people who are utterly unqualified for their jobs, from Pete Hegseth, the sec drunk, to Lisa McMahon at education, which she wants to tear to the ground. Everybody. This is a clown car administration. These are crash test dummies. They're not real humans. Emil Bove is a guy you must keep your eye on. He is corrupt. And by the way, I know we will probably not get the Senate back, but if we do, the House impeachment of Emil Bove is going to be lit. And there are federal judges who have before, including here from the great state of Florida, Alcee Hastings, removed from the federal bench for corruption. Bove is a rich target for that. And I will tell you, if the members of the Senate on the Republican caucus are proud of Bove, you couldn't tell today, not one of them's out there bragging about it. You know why? They know what he is. They know who he is. They know he's a shit human being, a shit lawyer, and will be a terrible judge. They know he's just there as part of the Trump extended crime family. They know this. They know this absolutely. They're 100% sure on this. There's no daylight. There's no mystery. There's no like, I wonder how this will all work out. We know how it's all going to work out. It's going to be a legal and judicial disaster. This is not a question, folks. This is not a speculation. So Emil Bove in the U.S. Senate, you guys are on the top of the enemies list today, along with Donald Trump for his entire Virginia Guiffre issue. Appreciate everybody listening to the Enemies List podcast. We will be back with another episode shortly. Also, folks, we're going to do another Q&A session soon. Send us your questions. We love answering them, and y'all apparently really like us answering them. So talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. And subscribe to Lincoln Square. You can also check me out on my Lincoln Project podcast. Check me out on Tuesday nights, streaming on Lincoln Square with the strategy session with Stuart Stevens and Joe Trippi and a cast of thousands. On Thursday nights, I stream the breakdown for Lincoln Project with Maya May. And I've, 17 podcasts. So you know the drill. Like, subscribe, do all those things. Appreciate everybody. Talk to you soon.